As some of you may have known, there was a investor call today. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Annual stockholders
meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in this, Bob Chapek was asked some pretty pressing questions. And I know you guys listened to it, and I heard a few clips of it. But he was asked directly about the firing of Gina Carano and Kathleen Kennedy, and we'll get into this whole thing. But Andre, set us up here. What do you see is going on?
Well, just to sort of set the stage for exactly what this is, it's an investor meeting, an investor call of sorts that Disney holds on a fairly regular basis. And this is where actual shareholders, so not like the huge guys, well, them too, but also the smaller investors, the ones that Disney really don't like to have to deal with, but they still have to because they own stock in the company, therefore part of the company, where they get their say. Reina, as a shareholder, take us through this event, which I'm sure that you followed with interest.
Yes, I did. Usually this event is held in person. And as a stockholder, you can go and attend the meeting in person. But if you cannot, it is always, the audio is always recorded and uploaded to Disney's investor relations website, not Disney.com, the Walt Disney Company. So usually at these events, again, this year was different because it was virtual. And they usually go over the business in the beginning of the call. You know, they want people's votes on the executive board and who they want to, who they recommend that you vote stay. And I always vote against the recommendations that the corporation makes. But there's also an opportunity for stockholder proposals to get onto the slate of business to be voted on. Some stockholders kind of band together and they'll prepare a statement. The issue will get put on the agenda. Last year, one resolution to force Disney to reveal their lobbying activities was voted down. It was brought up again this year, and again this year, it was voted down. There was another resolution that was actually proposal that was very interesting that said that instead of the, candidate pool for the board of directors, instead of that being picked strictly from like management folks, you know, the people making the big bucks, to kind of go further down to include like, say, lower management cast members, maybe animators, people who aren't your normal executive breed, I would say. And the justification was for Disney to get an idea of what the company is like from other perspectives within the company, so that the executive board has a holistic view of the company instead of the little ivory tower view that they have. Well, that got voted down as well.
Oh, so they were going to do their own little undercover boss kind of thing?
Not undercover boss, but kind of
the same concept though, where you kind of get a read from the room of the rest of the company and to kind of see how they're feeling. And I'm willing to bet I know why they didn't want to do that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, they, as soon as I saw they recommended against it, I said, okay, let me read and find out what this is about. And I voted for it because I'm like, this is great. You get an idea of what the company is operating like from so many, like a 360 viewpoint. What I get in executive circles, like a 360 view of what's going on with the company. But yeah, Tom, you're exactly right. Like undercover boss.
Yeah, and I'm willing to bet that a lot of the lower level employees would not be too happy with the company as a whole right now, and they probably don't feel like they're very important in the whole grand scheme of things.
No, especially the ones that got let go. The ones that were still working, it was pretty obvious they were happy to be working. Some of them got to ask questions. So they were, kind of bowing down in tribute. But those 32,000 people who lost their jobs, there's no mention about them. So they do have after those proposals are voted on, then you get to the tap dance that goes on with job tape, I guess. I think Iger had made a a statement in the beginning, and then they brought Chapek on. So it's a very obvious difference between how Iger speaks to the room and how Chapek, speaks to the room. So Chapek kind of goes, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say a lot of that comes from his background as well. I mean, you have to remember the weatherman used to go up in front of cameras and have to talk, off the cuff all the time. So his path to getting there was a little bit different. So, but that's why, you have somebody who's a money person like Chapek is, from the product side of things, and they're not normally used to speaking, off the cuff or in public to the extent that you have to as a corporate officer.
Yeah, he sounded like he was basically recounting a lot of pre-written responses. It felt like to me.
That's actually pretty normal. The conversation that was heard today during the course of the call. And if you listen to any of the quarterlies, it's the same way, and everything's a very, very, very puff, very softball style. It's when you get into the actual questions from the folks that are just the lowly stockholders like Reina and myself, you actually start to hear some real things. So
absolutely. So speaking of real things, of course, Chapek goes through the highlights of the company and talking about what's going on, what's new, what's coming. Now, when this meeting was in person last year, the people in person got to see clips from The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They got to see clips from upcoming movies, a big show that they got to see. This time, not so much because it was all virtual and it's all audio. So after Chapek kind of talks about what's going on with the parks and what's not going on with the parks, then you get into the 30 minutes that are set aside to answer stockholder questions. Now, you had to call in. I wasn't able to call in, unfortunately. But that's the calls that's the people that you get who are just the normal folks. Some of them who were very glad to be there and worship at the altar of Disney, and some stockholders who were none too pleased with what Disney is doing. And in particular, there were 2 calls that came in. Unfortunately, one guy, he wasn't ready. So I really would have liked to have heard what his question was. But you had 2 questions. One, where one person who was from Virginia brought up the point that with Gina Carano and Pedro Pascal working on the same show, only one of them got fired. And there seems to be a conservative blacklist because of that at Disney. And he was asked point blank, this is the way,
Yeah.
And
brilliantly stated. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
It was very well done. His pattern of speech was beautiful, his presentation. And I guarantee you that rocked Mr. Chapek back on his heels because, his answer was less than satisfactory.
Oh, it was horrible. You could tell he was not happy to get that question. He was none too pleased to have to answer that. And he almost seemed indignant that he had to answer that question, which he didn't answer, but gave, the whole thing, we should basically all hold hands, kumbaya, and all this stuff. And it's just, no, it didn't.
That's where I felt like he was kind of doing the pre-recorded answer, but then it didn't quite fit the question. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah.
It kind of felt like he was just kind of stating a statement that he was told to say. If you're asked about this, this is what you say. And he's stumbling around it because it's like he knows he's not really answering the question. At least that was my perception of this. What did you guys think?
You're 100% right on the money. He wasn't prepared to answer it the way the question was asked, exactly as you said. And the answer was like, oh, well, we see ourselves as a family company with family values, which if they were in person, you would have heard some people in the audience laugh at. In person, because, there were some significant, like, audible responses in the meeting, the previous meeting, which was held in North Carolina, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was North Carolina.
You could actually hear some of the people react to the questions they didn't want to answer. And this, in the virtual system, I mean, you would have had a lot of people, if you could have heard them laughing at the answer to that question, because it was terrible. It was poorly worded, and he was clearly not prepared to answer the question that was presented in that way. So that's the other reason why the slate wanted a vote to go a particular way when it came to revealing their lobbying activities, which should be transparent.
Right.
So, it's, of course it's not, but it should be. And that would have actually just put, on blast exactly what the company's, policies and political ambitions when it comes to, things like that. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to take over.
No, you're fine. And basically my interpretation of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andre and Script and Reina and Culture, any of you chime in, and welcome Script.
Hey, Script.
Is basically, we're not hypocrites to the question of why are you acting like hypocrites? They didn't give a reason or a rhyme to it. They're like, no, we're not hypocrites. Yeah. You may think we are, even though you have good reason to believe we are. We're not.
Yeah. I really wish he would have gotten more pushback on that. I thought it was really weak of the other investors that were asking that none came forward and say, wait, you didn't answer this. We really would like an answer, because that's the only way things are going to be changed, is in a venue like this, that people like Chapek are actually held accountable and told that, no, that answer will not do. We're going to need a real answer here. And we didn't get it. We got the bullcrap PR answer, like, oh no, there's no bias. We just do what's right. And please don't ask me this again. And how dare you ask me this, you pleb, what you think like your tiny little portfolio makes you. It was kind of like that attitude.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that the rest of the investors that were there should have allowed that answer to go unchallenged.
I think the hard part of that is because it is virtual and everyone's on the phone. I think if that was in person, Andre, that pushback really would have happened.
But how do you guys think he would have actually responded to it? I think he would have had the same response, because this whole thing feels like it's pre-programmed. As I was saying, he's kind of, because like Culture was saying, Bob Iger on the one hand has a bit more experience with dealing with shit on the fly. If you're a weatherman and you've got something happens and you got to improvise, you're trained for that kind of thing. Bob Chapek is not somebody who's trained to work with an audience or even deal with, the idea of, I'm in front of, thousands, if not more people talking, and everything I'm doing and saying is being, analyzed. I feel like that's a big part of it, that they pre-prepared Bob Chapek, I think.
They did. And just to give an example from my background in engineering, just like in Office Space, the movie, engineers are not very good with people. They're not. They don't like to put the majority of them in front of people. If you can talk to people, that's something very different. And that's a different skill set. And you're able to speak off the cuff exactly, like Iger is. I've been in meetings where you get someone who's a manager, but they're not good with talking to people, and they have their script and they stick to it.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I felt like we were watching here.
Oh, yeah. It just the way that the question sounded, it just seemed like, okay, from legal, they're like, okay, this is what you say. No matter what they say about this topic, if they ask you about Gina Carano, this is what you say.
Well, and we don't have to really speculate too much more. You actually have the audio clips, right, Lorraine?
I do have the audio clips. I have two. So we'll play the first one, which is the question about the blacklist.
And our next question today, Mr. Chapek, comes from David Almasi from Alexandria, Virginia. Please go ahead.
Hi there. It's clear that there's a new blacklist punishing conservatives in the entertainment industry. Disney Plus actors Pedro Pascal and Gina Carano tweeted similar analogies of current political events to Nazi Germany. Yet only Carano, who is considered a conservative, was fired from The Mandalorian. Regarding Disney and a blacklist, this is the way?
Well, thank you for your question. I don't really see Disney as characterizing itself as left-leaning or right-leaning, yet instead standing for values that are universal, values of respect, values of decency, values of integrity, and values of inclusion. And we seek to have not only how we operate, but the content that we make reflective of the rich diversity of the world that we live in. And I think that's a world that we all should live in harmony and peace. Thank you for your question. Next question, please.
Thank you, sir. Our next question.
That is... Yeah, he botched that one, and I hope
that's what I mean. It sounded like
attention,
a
and they won't let him
pre-programmed
get away
answer.
with this.
Yeah, it sounded like a pre-programmed answer. It's not even answering the question. It's like, if you're asked this is what you say.
Yeah.
And what they're basically saying is, we don't find ourselves as left or right leaning. We just find ourselves on the right side of history. That's what I heard.
Yeah, that's exactly what I heard too. It's like, no. We are not on the left. We are not left leaning. We are just on the right side of history. And that just so happens to be left leaning, but we don't call ourselves that. That's what he said. It was a complete non-answer, complete deflection. And my worry is, of course, that the entertainment media complex is going to let him get away with it, which of course they will. No. But I hope that every single investor out there took a particular notice of this.
He said they represent certain values. Didn't say what those values were, though.
Yeah, that's what I mean, the right side of history.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is like, we don't consider ourselves left leaning or right leaning, but that's not the question that was asked. He asked specifically about a blacklist against conservatives. It's more tap dancing. This guy isn't nearly as good at it as Iger was, and it just shows in the way he answers a question. He can't reformat the answer in real time to have it fit. And it's clearly garbage, because you can see it, which is why they don't want to answer it. You can see, a bias. And again, it's against people that are even perceived as being somewhat conservative. Not even, you could be, centrist and still be accused of being, conservative, or, other things associated with 1940s Germany. But it's just, it's frustrating. And again, this was when Lorraine and I are shooting messages back and forth at each other.
Because as soon as he said that, I just started yelling, "You freaking hypocrite." It's like, how stupid do you really think that we are? That with everything that we've seen out there, and I believe you guys have seen the article about the poll that was done by a very prominent polling firm. And a lot of people had basically said, yeah, Gina Carano was unjustly fired. It's like, come on, we know that there's a different standard. We know that there's a double standard. And the standard is, if you work for us and you have the politics that we pander to, you're fine. If you don't, step out of line and you're gone, or we berate you. And that's exactly what they do. So this answer, it just really made me mad to hear that, because yes, he did not answer the question. And that's what we wanted to hear. Is there a blacklist? Yes or no? But he's not going to answer that, because they're not going to, make themselves culpable and say, oh yeah, we have a blacklist.
Yeah, well, if he says yes, or if he says no, then immediately that opens him up to a lawsuit. And you got to know that Disney lawyers are there, says, stay on script, Bob, stay on script.
Oh, that's what I'd said earlier. Legal probably said, if you get asked about Gina Carano, this is what you say. And they probably made him memorize it too, so he wouldn't forget it.
But the other thing too, we have certain values. I'm like, really, Bob? Take a look at the stuff that been doing recently in regards to, supporting for certain things in China, expressing certain, like, really, those are the kind of values you have? It makes him look completely like a total hypocrite.
Yeah, I wish somebody would have brought up the whole Mulan thing as well. That would have been interesting to hear him go after.
Yeah, but I have to say, very weak of the investors in general to not ask any kind of questions like this, and to let them get away with what was said here. But Tom, you were saying.
Well, I was going to say there's a little bit more here if Lorena wants to set it up.
Yes. So the second poignant question, or actual question, that was asked was by George in Texas from San Antonio, who flat out asked, you guys planning on firing Kathleen Kennedy or what? I'm paraphrasing, but that was pretty much it. He just came out and said that. And Bob's answer was very telling about Kathleen Kennedy's future at Lucasfilm.
Thank you for your question. Next question, please.
Thank you, sir. Our next question today comes from George Gazelle with out of San Antonio, Texas. Please go.
Greetings and salutations. Are you guys looking at firing Kathleen Kennedy or asking her to resign and promote somebody like Filoni or Favreau or both as a co-counsel?
Thank you for your question, George. We've been absolutely thrilled that we can have the kind of creative talent in our company, the likes of Kathy Kennedy to run Lucas. And we look forward to having Kathy directing the activities of the entire Lucasfilm organization for many years to come. Thank you for your question. Next question, please.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I did a video and kept the uhs in there because I wanted people to see just how he was spinning with this question here.
You know that joke answer about when you ask me if I like a movie, and I say I loved it. It was much better than Cats. That's what this answer is.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It is. This is exactly him not answering the question in a different way, because he can say we're lucky to have this person and look forward to working here for years to come. But that doesn't mean that they're going to keep her around for years to come. And it doesn't mean that they aren't aware of people being frustrated with her performance. But at the same time, it gives a nod to the fact that we could be stuck with this kind of leadership at Disney Lucasfilm for much longer than any of us find acceptable. So it's just not only that, he presented her as a creative. Are you flipping kidding me? Creative at what?
Yeah, that's funny. Because let's be real here. I mean, if you're an investor, you have every right in the world to be saying, especially right now, being concerned with how Star Wars is being handled in the middle of all that's going on, because Disney is not in good shape.
Oh, absolutely. And even last year, because there were a couple of investors at the meeting last year who were specifically talking about Star Wars and just how badly it was being handled and asking what were their plans to fix Star Wars. And at that time, Iger, he gave a very, snake oil salesman answer as he does, but there were people there in person asking about it then. So I'm not surprised that you have people who just have really lost patience.
It just shows you. It just shows you very little has changed. Yes, sure. The guy at the head of the table has been replaced, so there's a new face, but very little in terms of the corporate culture has changed.
First, I would like to say kudos to the Lone Star State for sending someone who could ask a real question. And this guy, he obviously listens to John Campea, and he's in our circles of the internet. You heard him like, greetings and salutations.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, that was the tell right there. I knew it.
Well, I gotta ask this. How do these investor meeting calls really work? I mean, are they really screened? I mean, I can't imagine they'll just let you on and ask any willy-nilly question. And the reason I ask is I have a feeling like enough people were bothered to ask this question that they had to let them go through. Like at some point, like normally I would imagine they wouldn't let like a question like this get through. Or how does this work exactly with these investor calls?
It's a good question.
In person, usually people just get in line, like at a convention, first person gets in line, gets asked a question, and they just have a limit of time, and people just go ahead and ask them. And while I wasn't able to dial in, I think it was the same thing. They just clicked over so that you're ready. And the reason why I say that is because one guy who was from Canada, who they said, your line is open, all you heard was stuff in the background, and you heard the call going on, and he's like, sir, your line is open. You can go ahead and ask a question. And he didn't, and they skipped to someone else. But the earnings calls that are held, those are definitely screened because you have to be with one of the big investment houses in order to get on that. So, your regular stockholders like myself or Culture, we're not allowed on those calls. We don't have access to being on those calls. But
Right.
the stockholders meeting, I say it, it's the analogy that I use. You have the great unwashed with the torches and pitchforks. They have to face us.
I only wish that this Texan, and massive kudos to him, I only wish that he would have given us an even better soundbite by prefacing the question with, during Kathleen Kennedy's reign, she has taken Star Wars from $2 billion in the first installment of the sequel trilogy to barely passing $1 in the third installment, and being being beaten at the box office by the Joker. And fans are furious. Just like begin with that information, then the question. Because now the entertainment media complex, they're just going to ignore this question. It's like, oh, that was just a hater. If you're just at the stage, it would have been so much more powerful. But again, more of the unwashed masses should have followed through and asked questions like this, because they're getting away with it. It'll be interesting to see, though, exactly how long they're going to continue and how far they will allow Kathleen Kennedy to destroy what Jon Favreau is doing. Tom, you had some information to what's been happening in the realm of The Mandalorian lately, courtesy of Kathleen Kennedy.
Oh, she won. It's dead. She killed it.
Can we elaborate on that a little bit?
It's been a slow-moving coup. I mean, all she knew was to pull out the right pin, and the whole fucking thing would topple. And she knew exactly how to do that with Gina Carano. The moment you take her out of the equation, you took that baby out of the show, you make Boba Fett the focal point. If we take into consideration a lot of the stuff we heard about Pedro Pascal behind the scenes, and you add in that they lost Gina Carano, the show's dead. What has Favreau got to work with? And as a result of this, there's been 2 books now that have been canceled that were Mandalorian related. I'm still going to be curious to see if it even starts filming when it's supposed to after Boba Fett's done. I really think that Kathy won. I think she got her fucking wish. I think that she tried to pressure her way into this shit the way she wanted it to, and when it was not exactly what she wanted, or she realized that people were enjoying something that she had nothing to do with or very little to do with, she wanted to burn the whole fucking thing down.
Yeah, well.